This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to our Tuesday Talks. We're excited to be back after our break in March, during which I hope all of you went to the online conference. But if you didn't, today's session gives you a little glimpse into some of the things we talked about. Hopefully you got the email about today's session that included the link to the presentation that we're going to kind of follow up on today. And I want to thank Felicia Abrams, who's joined us today, who brought us those speakers, Seema Rao and Michelle Millam. They were fabulous. And thank you, Felicia, for arranging that and for facilitating that conversation during the conference. It was a lot of great engagement, and a lot of people asked for a continuation of that conversation. So we thought we'd start with that today. So whether you were at the conference and attended that session or not, we are here to have an open conversation that anyone can join in wherever you are in the conversation. So Felicia, would you like to take it away?
Of course, and like she said, good morning, everyone, and I want to thank Jennifer and Christina for asking me to be here this morning, and thank all of you for taking time out of your day to participate. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping pieces. This is, like Jennifer said, an open space. I facilitate the conversation, so this is for you guys to share your thoughts on some of the questions that we brought up during the panel, to hear from you, or to put it in the chat if you would like, or send it directly to me in the chat if you would like to remain anonymous. You can do all of these. I'll be keeping an eye on that. But to share your thoughts, your opinions, frustrations, suggestions, really a space for you guys to talk about how you're feeling, which is one of the most important pieces of this conversation, is really getting to what's the most important in our museum and our institutions are the people. So it's the people who are the backbone. It's the people who provide the great programming, provide the great content, the exhibitions, the connections, the legacies, all of these things, all to the public, and all the work that allows us to fulfill our missions and work within our community. And that's, when you boil it down, that's the most important part of museums. This idea of self-care, staff wellness, it looks different for everyone, which is why I encourage all of you to speak up, or like she said, type in the chat if you don't have a mic, or if you don't have a mic that's working, it's okay. And there are a few basics that we discussed in the program a few weeks ago, or that you've watched recently. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to jump into that conversation. To say that this last year has been an easy one would be, I think, the understatement of the century. We've watched, like I said in that other conversation, we've watched as museums close their doors. A little bit of feedback there. We've watched as museums close their doors, friends and colleagues have lost jobs or been furloughed. Everything has been shifted in a way that I don't think anyone can fully comprehend yet, and we're still kind of working through all of these pieces together. In the last year, and you've seen it in the news and in articles, more attention has been given to the inequalities that are in museums. So what are these conversations that we can have to address these topics and provide the necessary support to our volunteers and our staff? And what does that look like, not only from a leadership perspective, but also from an employee perspective? How can you advocate for yourselves? So this panel was extremely rewarding to work on. Those of you who, if you've had a chance to watch it, the dialogue going on between Seema, Michelle, and I was the same thing that happened in every planning meeting we had in the months leading up, where we used it as really a place for ourselves to vent about different topics and to talk about different topics. So I look forward to continuing this conversation today. I am available on email or Twitter, and I can throw those in the chat here in a second if you have any questions or want to follow up. But with that being said, did everyone watch the panel? Has everyone seen the panel? Okay. So what does staff care in museums look like for you? Who has any ideas on this? You can just jump in there. It's okay.
Elsie, go ahead.
I think we already had this conversation, but vaccines at the moment, I think rallying around and making sure that everybody has access to vaccines and vaccine appointments that they can make, that has been a very big issue for us. Still navigating how we go back to having our teaching staff teach without being vaccinated. That would be my question for the day. How do we keep everybody healthy? What's the best structure for keeping everybody healthy? That means not just the staff, but also the participants.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of this is, physical health, but mental health as well. How many of you in the last few months have felt a little burnt out or have worked with employees who have felt the burnout? I know from a programming perspective, we've been asked in the last year to create more programs than we have in the last 6 that I've been here. And so creativity is tapped, and it's still being asked to push. So how do we balance that? Does anyone have suggestions on how they have done that? Oh, everyone is real quiet this morning. Come on.
Everyone's very quiet.
I know.
We all need more coffee.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Felicia. It's not just, the balance of, the creativity and the burnout but it's also this mental health piece that you were talking about, because so many of us have colleagues or friends who no longer work in our field, either temporarily or permanently. So members of the association, and for me, it's a lot of people in my association world. They don't have jobs anymore, and so those whole support groups that I had before are gone. And I'm sure it's the same for so many people on this call and in our museums. Your frontline staff is gone, or somebody that you worked with in another museum is gone. So you're dealing with burnout and that loss of support.
Yeah.
This is Tracy Gillespie. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Tracy, go ahead.
I'm in my car, so I'm doing too many things at once. I'm kind of coming at it at a different angle. Felicia, you were talking about, the added weight of additional programming, different types of programming. I over the last year have experienced the opposite, where I haven't been able to do any programming hardly at all. And that has been frustrating in the sense that the favorite part of my job, with many different hats like most of you, is I can't do the favorite part of my job because I can't do the programming.
Right.
And that's just it's been very frustrating and almost depressing. It's like, whoa, what am I doing now? It's just been so frustrating. So I'm looking forward to being able to do more as things are opening up more. But that's an totally opposite thing, rather than being overwhelmed with programming. It's no fun not being able to do any programming. So
Exactly.
I will mute myself again. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. No, it's exactly right. It's there has not been a cookie cutter situation for anyone. Everyone here has had something different going on this last year. And so trying to figure out the best moves forward has been an interesting part of this. So, any other ideas of what you can do?
Well, I think that you're hit on something, Felicia, that we're already had whether you were had your regular programming, and then 2020 hit, and then we had to transition to figuring out how to keep in touch with, our audiences and, keeping relevant digitally. There's that creation of, new content, new programs that way, and it's exciting. And, we've all, I think, learned so many new skills over this past year, but now once organizations start delivering this additional content, is the public or our, leadership in our organizations going to demand that same level of, hard work and an effort? And is the burnout, how do we, I think there's needs to be a conversation with leadership that, people were there, they met those demands, but is it realistic to maintain that?
Exactly. How many of you have reviewed your employee work profiles, your contracts, or if you have those sort of things, your position descriptions, that's the word I'm looking for, in the last year, or your staff's position descriptions in the last year? Are you looking at places to make changes for those and to put in, like Christina said, put in the more digital side of things, balance it in with the on-site side of things, so that you're creating a feasible work profile? Position description just doesn't come to mind anymore after working in the state for so many years. But creating a work profile. So looking at, not just piling more work on, not just putting more work on employees, but actually balancing those pieces out, balancing those parts out. That's one of the things that we're starting to do here. And one of the things I've been looking at in the last year is taking a hard look at how the department is structured, and what we're doing, and how we can make it more efficient and effective in the future. I know, Katie, I know it's just one more thing to do. But it's one thing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was on an earlier call today with some association people, other association people, and we were talking about our boards and how they don't necessarily understand. They see the final product and they see how great it looks. They don't understand what actually goes into it. And I kind of got that with the in-person conference. So for our board orientation manual, there is a whole a cheat sheet or a worksheet about how do we contract a hotel for the conference? What are the steps we have to go through? What does that look like? What are all the questions we have to ask? But they several of them said that they were starting to do that with virtual things. Like, okay, here's a virtual program. You don't see here's what all the elements are that have to go into it, and here's the pieces that we have to present and put together in order to make that happen. And maybe that's something that could be useful for museum boards as well, to provide to your board members.
I think so, because a lot of the time our boards aren't made up of museum people,
right?
Or profit people. So teaching them all those steps, we colloquially call it showing our pain. So we show our pain by saying, here are the things that we need to do to make this happen. So when somebody else says, I have a great idea, I said, okay, but show me all the steps that need to go into it and how we're going to do it, what the timeline is. It'll help create for even upper management who may not understand what goes into virtual programs, because that was one of the issues we were facing, is not understanding all the bits and pieces it takes from reservations all the way to delivery of program, and why a certain level couldn't be attained, why we had to limit the number of groups we could do in a day was possible. Right. So clarity is the most important piece of all of this. The more clear we are, the more open and honest we are with the conversations that we're having, the more honest we are with challenges that are being faced. I think, at least from my own perspective, and one thing I've had to work on is not just saying, sure, I'll get it done, and then putting in all the extra hours at home to make sure it gets done, to taking that step back and say, I can do it, but we can't do it in March, maybe we can do it in May. Or I can take on this task, but this is going to go by the wayside instead. So it's what Michelle and Seema and I called the smart nose, the nose, but with contingencies. The sure, I can do this, but this is going to have to give. And encouraging our staff to talk more and using it yourself to, your managers to say, yes, but here's something that I need to do to balance that out. That way we're creating this work-life balance, which is also important. And one of the major pieces we really need to work on as an industry. The thing about museum folks and all of you who are here today is that we are really dedicated to museums, and to the public, and to making sure that the public has a place to go on vacation. The public has a place to come and learn something new or experience, go to a trivia night or go to a brewery program or any of these things that we love to participate in, which is why we help develop those programs, but also show that I like to do things too. I can't be here 7 days a week putting on different programming because I've got my own life, I've got my own stuff I need to do. So being very clear about that and expecting that of your staff. And at one point we talked about,
No, I was going to say, I love what you were saying about the smart nose. That's something that's, I think a lot of us are, because we love what we do and we want to make sure it gets done right, we have a tendency to say yes too many times to the point where suddenly it's Saturdays and we're doing work, Sundays we're doing work, we're checking emails all the time. And when you get into that cycle, then it's expected from those above you. Like, I work for a board.
Exactly.
I found that if I start answering emails constantly on the weekends, then that's expected. And they're like, I suddenly, if I don't answer on a Saturday and I get an email on a Sunday, hey, why haven't you written me back? I've finally, 2021 has been extremely stressful for everybody here on staff. And, one of the things I've said is like, hey, look, weekends, just let it go. You've got to have your me time, your personal space. Otherwise, we're all going to get burnt out. And even myself, it's very tempting sometimes to work 7 days a week to know that you're getting things done, but it's an ongoing cycle. In fact, right before this Zoom call, I had a member of our building and grounds committee. It's like, hey, I need you to call me really quick. And I knew it would not be a quick call. And there was this part of me inside. It's like, well, this is something you've got to take care of. But I was like, you know what? No, structure. There is a time and place. I will get back to him. Nothing's going to fall apart until I get back, and from now until the time I talk to him. So it's just like kind of learning those things. I also had another board member who yesterday I was really rushing to meet a deadline on something, and had a board member who says, hey, can you go to the mill and do this really quick? And I was, no, I can't. I can do it tomorrow, but I can't do it right now. So yeah, sometimes it's hard because you're juggling too many things at once, and like the point that was said earlier is those expectations. Nobody understands all the stuff that goes into it. One of the things I started doing, I guess last year before last, is every 2 weeks I send an itemized bullet point list of everything I've done over those past 2 weeks to my board. Say, hey, these are the things I've worked on, and they're constantly blown away. Like, oh my God, how do you do this in just in 5 days a week? It's a lot. So it helps. So I do, but yeah, to go back to what I was saying, the smart nose are a very, very good thing.
And I'm not great at it, because like you said, I like to say yes to things. So it's one that I've been learning to do. But one thing I've done is set up office hours. So I feel like a professor sometimes, but I've set up office hours every day in the week. I carve out a little bit of time where everyone knows when they are, so they can just pop right in and see me during that time period. And I try to keep it lightly scheduled. So it's either the time I'm checking emails and trying to catch up on a few things, or working on planning for the future, my kind of thinking time. But it's trying to get that piece of structure so that I'm letting people know I'm not available to you every minute of every day, but here's when I am. And if it's an emergency, absolutely come to me. But if it's something that can wait an hour, let it wait an hour. Gives you time to think about it a little bit before bringing it to me, because usually those are the situations where you need to think a little bit on what you're going to
Yeah.
say and how you're going to say it before it comes anyway. So just
Well, and they
setting,
might
trying
come
to
up
set up
with
some
a
of that structure.
solution while they're
Ex-
waiting for you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, Felicia, you're a
Time
manager.
blocking.
Oh, go ahead, Christina. Sorry.
I was going to say it's in setting office hours, I find it hard to do because, like, you guys were saying, you want to get the job done and you put in the hours, and that's, people like us that gravitate to the nonprofit sector, are dedicated. But time blocking is a really great skill to utilize if you don't do it. And so, like
Yes.
Felicia, you mentioned, that you have office hours, but if folks aren't familiar with time blocking, it's basically, setting up your calendar for specific tasks and or projects to work on. But it's also, like, I am going to use this afternoon to recharge, or
Right.
whatever, making scheduling time for yourself, um, or to take care of your staff, depending, is a valuable use of your time. And I don't think
Yeah,
that
and
we give ourselves that enough.
Agreed.
there's a great book
It's
on
like, well, I'll
time
do it
blocking.
later. And
There's a great book I read last year that talked about this, and I started doing time blocking after that to help myself. Um, that I will have to pull off my shelf and send to you all. But I think it was Work Simply by Carson Tate. But it talked about focusing on different types of working styles, not just for yourself, but for people you're working with, so you can help work in their style as well. It'll help other people succeed if you don't expect everyone to conform to you, but you're addressing the different working styles and learning styles that you're working with, which I think is something that we do really well as a nonprofit industries. So Jennifer, you had something you were going to say.
Well, I had a question for you. So you're kind of in a management position, and
Hmm.
so you create these office hours and have people come at certain times. For someone who, say, is under you, who isn't in a management position, is maybe more frontline or how would you like to see them do that office hour thing too, or does that not work when you're not at the management level? How would you like to see
Yeah.
people at that level work with you on that kind of thing?
I encourage all of my office staff to do that. That
Okay.
way they block out time so we can work together, and we use Google Suites here at JYF. I'm a huge advocate of using the calendar. And if someone needs to set a meeting with me, they can go right in and see everything that's on my calendar, all of my blocked and saved times out, and when I'm available. And so I encourage them to do the same thing. It doesn't work as well for my frontline staff, at least not the way we have our staffing structure set up, because we're part time. People come in and do tours when they're scheduled to do them, and so we work with them. But with them, they get to really pick their own schedules. They tell me which 4 days a week they want to work and what hours they can work in, and we work with that. That way if they need to go off for a doctor, if they can't work on Tuesdays, then okay, you can't work on Tuesdays. That's fine with me. And every now and then they'll pick up a day that they don't usually work, and that's helpful as well. But it's just what I encourage is just communication. Communicate with me on what you need to do. Right now, with my full-time staff members, a couple of them are working from home a few days a week in order to balance childcare and helping out at home and that sort of thing. And I expect they know what tasks are expected to get done, and as long as they get their tasks done, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the results. I'm not micromanaging their time. They're adults. They know how to use their time. I think that's one of the things we talked about in the conversation on the 18th was, I don't need to know why you're taking leave. If you need to take leave, take it. I'm going to make sure you're okay, because person. But if you need to take leave for a day, as long as everything is going smoothly here, take the day off. Leave halfway through the day. I had a chat with some folks out of the Ohio History Connection, and they gave me a good idea. I haven't been able to use it yet, but they had their staff do a SWOT analysis on themselves. So what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What makes them feel relaxed, and what helps them recharge? They did that one morning at 9 o'clock for their staff meeting, and then they gave their staff the rest of the day off to go do the things that make them feel recharged. The only rule for the day was they couldn't check emails until 4 o'clock that afternoon. And so it's something that I really want to try one day and see if I can make it a regular thing in our schedules, just to show that it's okay to take that time. It's okay if you need an hour in the day to go and recharge and reset after something stressful has happened. I want you to do it, and I encourage all of my staff people to do that so that we don't face that burnout, we don't face that frustration that often cause so many people to leave onto other institutions, which is great for other institutions, but bad for me because I really like my folks.
One thing I would add to that is like during the week, we here at CCHA, and we're a staff of 3, and we have weekly staff meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But what I try to do is find that balance. We keep them short because we're all wearing a lot of different hats, and we're all really busy. But it's also a time of the week where we communicate, let each other know what's going on. You know, we might have some brief talk about like, hey, how was your weekend? But we try to keep it between 30 and 45 minutes. And that's it, because any longer, you know, I've in the past, I've been in staff meetings where people will drone on for an hour about all the plants they're planting in their garden, and some of the fence repair they've done over the weekend, or their kids you know, their kids getting some good grades. And I'm just like, and this relates to how it's just, and it goes on and on and on, where that's longer than the actual discussion. And we keep our meetings very efficient. I come in with a bullet point list, you know, this, how's everybody doing, you know, tell me about your weekend. Fantastic. Okay, great. Now, you know, here's my list.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, here's, you know, tell me your list. Melanie, tell me your list. Boom, 30 45 minutes, we're done. Coffee for everybody. Coffee and donuts.
Yeah. Yeah, we do the same thing. Our staff meeting, if it lasts an hour, it's because we chatted a little bit at the beginning, or we are a little late getting there together. But we try to. I found that it's better for everyone if we do it just slightly after lunch and for 1 hour, because everyone wants to get back and finish up and wrap up the day.
Yeah. I mean, when you get to the point, if you're in a staff meeting and it gets to a point where somebody's on their phone, and or somebody's, you know, clicking on their email, you know that it's running a little long.
Yeah.
So that's at that point, it's like, okay, you know, this should be everybody focused. And if it's going this long and people are like, oh, these two are talking, it doesn't concern me, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, it's a staff meetings for everybody, not just a conversation between two people, which sometimes has a tendency to happen, but it's best to try to involve everybody.
Yeah. When I see meeting requests pop up on my calendar that are 2 or 2.5 hour longs, I'm automatically filled with dread. Because I just can't handle a 2.5 hour meeting anymore. And I think that's because of COVID. I just can't do it. So hitting that hour mark is about my limit for sitting in a room and talking about one topic. So it kind of switch gears here. What are some of the barriers that challenge us in really jumping in and looking at, you know, self-care, staff wellness as a whole topic here? How are we challenged? What are the challenges for us as an institution? I know one easy one is staffing.
I
Staffing
would
levels.
also
We're all down in staff. Go for it, Nate.
I would also add, 2021 brings additional pressure because now as things are started, we're seeing our programs, we're selling out really
Yeah.
fast. We're selling tickets like we've never sold before. And so we've got this additional pressure of having to meet those demands, the projects we already planned for 2021, plus all the items that were postponed in 2020. So it's almost like you're trying to do 2 years worth of programs and projects and building and grounds on 2 years worth of stuff in a shorter time, in half the time. And there's that pressure to get it done, to make it happen, because there's public demand for it, there's board demand for it. The buildings will fall down if we don't. And it's on top of that, there's the fundraising aspect. Like, you have to make sure that the funds come in to meet all of these projects at once. So even though we're getting our programs back and we're getting our fundraisers back, it's not twice the amount. We're having to do twice the amount that we had before, but we're still getting the same amount for 1 year. And so there's a lot. I think some of those are some of the big barriers.
What other people think? Some folks that we haven't heard from yet today.
I know one of the things that we're starting to grapple with at the museum is leadership having an emphasis on everyone coming back 5 days a week in person. When having this flexibility and ability to work from home has been great for self-care, especially when we have needed staffing in the museum, kind of finding that balance. And so it's going to be interesting, and that's a lot of conversations that managers are having right now, is how do we find that balance again with this desire to bring everyone back on campus 5 days a week.
Yeah, that's a good point, Maggie.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised that taking a survey of how people feel, like comfort levels about that.
Well, and one of the issues that executive leadership has brought up with this is, the museum spent millions of dollars building all this office space for a growing staff. Yeah. And so I think it's also that cost, weighing, yes, exactly. Like, they know that the staff appreciates that flexibility, but they spent all this money for these offices that aren't being used.
And there's usually one staff person who doesn't want to work from home and is dying to go back full time. And so you want to respect that person and not have them working alone in the office all the time. But you're right, that this whole balance is huge. I do feel badly for museums that have these buildings with all this office space. We just have a small office. So if we don't go back, it doesn't kill anybody. There's no big building. There's an association in Richmond that renovated they own a building, and they just renovated their entire building. It reopened December of 2019.
Oh, no.
So they spent millions. They did a capital campaign, spent millions of dollars, renovated the building, and now they haven't been able to be in it for over a year. So they're trying to figure out what to do with this building they own. So I can see how it's an issue, particularly like you say, Maggie, when they just spent all this money on this office space.
Well, and I think about, VAM 20 or 2020, VAM 2020, where we went to the U.S. Army Museum that was set to open in April, like 2 weeks after we visited. What do you do and how do you balance it? So that's definitely one of those barriers, is how do you meet, now that there have been staff that prove that we can work at home and work at work, how do you balance that out? And so how can we make that work best when our purpose is to be open for the public, and to be open for the public who's here? Yeah, I agree. And Nathan, I'm right there with you. I I'm that crazy person that does better if I'm in the office that Jennifer was talking about. So I had a real hard time working from home because I need,
Oh,
I mean, you guys can
you
see all
need
this
that
stuff.
space.
I need the
Yeah.
space, I need my stuff, and without moving my office to my house just a mile up the road.
Well, that's also, I mean, for some people, being able to separate work from home
Hmm.
is a way for that mental well-being. But then when you can't do that, when it's all in one space, it's really, really difficult. Yeah, I had to be in the office. I really did. And I just mentioned in the chat room that we, as a staff, and we're a small staff, and we were still taking part of the time working from home before we all got vaccinated. And we got to a point where it was starting to get so busy and we weren't communicating as much because we weren't seeing each other as much. And so we had a staff retreat, just an offsite retreat. It was like, let's just get out, let's just talk it over. How can we not get, we cannot get burnt out this soon. We haven't even started our
Yeah.
first program. This is back in March. And so we had a great offsite staff retreat. We talked it all out. We came up with some ideas of how to fix that. We decided to come back to the office because it's easier. Like everybody's door is always open. We go in and out, we're talking about ideas, sharing ideas, asking questions, asking how we can help each other out. And it's better than it was because we were, I mean, like I said, when we were working part of the time from home, we were getting burnt out.
Yeah.
Specifically because we all had so much and we weren't communicating and helping each other out as much.
Well, and that brings out, communication. How do you communicate with your staff in the most effective way? So, I know Nathan, you said you started sending messages to your board every 2 weeks. We started sending out weekly emails saying, and I send it to my staff, here's my schedule of what's going on next week, just so you all know, and start sending out messages twice a month to our educators saying, here are the most important things that you need to know that's coming up or changes that are coming. That way you don't walk through the door one day and we've decided to switch the entire flow of the museum on you, which has happened a few times as we've tried to figure things out. Or, congratulations when you go on tour at the ship. The Godspeed is back, but the Susan Constant was gone. I hope you weren't planning on using her, which will be happening here in another week. So trying to catch up on those maintenance projects that we haven't been able to do, but making sure that we're clearly communicating that to the staff. And that was one of the struggles that we were having while we were all at home, not within our department, but also with other departments, because we didn't know anyone else's schedules. We didn't know who was working when. We all had a spat of time where we were furloughed at different times, but we didn't know each other's furlough dates. So I could easily be waiting 2 or 3 days for an answer on something I needed, the next day or quicker. And so trying to balance all of those out, but also having an understanding about what all of the departments are facing. And I think that's something we really need to work on here, is that I know that staffing levels are down in the different departments, but I don't know how much. And so I don't know how that's impacted their own schedules. So finding a way to be clear about your own schedules, your own time, and your own challenges is really important. We just had a new senior director start in our department, and she is all about clarity of communication, which I greatly appreciate, because she's pulling all the departments together again and getting us back on the same page. When we were all working at home, everyone was in their own little silo trying to get their project done, and no one was talking to each other. So we had duplicate projects going from different perspectives in different departments, which was always exciting. But just trying to knock down some of those doors and get that communication flowing, to help prevent that burnout. But on that same time, also finding ways to, we've talked about all the negatives here, but also find ways to celebrate the successes of our departments, and celebrate the successes of the people who are there. We made it through the pandemic. Our sites are still open. We are seeing, like Maggie said, you guys are seeing numbers. Our March of this year was bigger than March of 2019. Not by much, but by a little bit. And so we're starting to see those general visitation pre-pandemic numbers kick up, which says a lot for our advertising that's going out, our safety measures that are still here, they're still getting followed. And so congratulations to those departments who are doing that. But it doesn't address the worry that people have with those numbers of staff or number of people coming back in. And so how can we do that? But are there things that you guys do to either celebrate successes, keep staff morale up, because that's been a real struggle this year? Any ideas or thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts about that, but I did want to jump in on the communications thing real quick, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. So
Thanks for joining.
Thank you. One of the big challenges that I faced, and I know a lot of people within our organization have, and I'm sure you all have, is I feel like email has exponentially grown over the pandemic into a monster that I have absolutely no control over anymore. And it is probably the biggest stress of my life. And it is why I end up working at 10 o'clock at night or on Sunday or whatever, because I'm just trying desperately to get on top of it. And I just wondered if anyone here has there's a little bit of me that just wants to apply a scorched earth policy from 3 months ago and say, if I haven't answered it and they haven't followed up, it's obviously not important and I don't care. But I'm not the kind of person who can do that. So I would love to hear how people have dealt with that, because I'm sure it's not just something that's happening to me and to my organization.
Yeah, that's a great point, Renee. I was going to say that, email communication between, your staff, your coworkers and outside, that's how most people are communicating, but it's not the same personal connection, and it has become pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. You end up
even
having
more.
Yeah, you end up having like 10 emails instead of one conversation, and it's just
Yeah.
And everyone's like, get to inbox 0, and I'm like, there's no way I can get to inbox 0 without not coming to work for like 2 weeks and just doing that.
Yeah. Well, there's with setting up, not that we all want to have more Zoom calls, but kind of moving conversations from email to Zoom is a way to kind of have that connectivity, but it is another thing to do.
I agree. And like Maggie put here, using Slack or Teams or something where you can have internal conversations instead of shooting emails back and forth to each other. When Seema and Michelle and I were putting together this presentation and this talk, originally we didn't use email. We had a shareable Google document where we just went in, and that's how we communicated with each other as we started building the pieces out. And that was to keep it out of our inboxes, because that was one of the things that Seema had brought up, is she was really struggling with the emails and trying to keep the numbers down. So she uses Slack for her internal communications with or something similar with her staff, but just trying to keep the emails out to the bare minimum. But like you said, when everyone's using that as the form of communication, it's hard to dig through them all. I know I was out for 3 weeks recently, and it was a little terrifying when I came back to all of the emails in the inbox that I had to go through. But I applied sort of a policy. If it didn't need to be, I didn't do quite a scorched earth, but I may have salted some of the grounds. If it had been from that first week in the 3-week period and I saw that the deadline had already passed, I just kind of moved it into a folder to take care of later, because odds are they probably got the answer from someone else already, and didn't come to me, didn't need me for it. Or I delegated some of them down that dealt with the projects that my staff was working on. I sent those emails to them so that they could be the ones answering it, so I didn't have to ask them and then answer it myself. So just tried to move it around a little bit. But,
Felicia, I actually got an out of office from somebody who it sounds like he's using a scorched earth policy. If he was like, I'm going to be in and out of the office for the next few weeks. If I don't respond to your email by X date, send it again because I threw it out.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure it goes there, but I mean, I guess if you warn people that that your email's going to get thrown out, they might. So you could be.
They might follow up.
Yeah, one thing I've done is like I've told the staff, especially if they're going out of town, I said, because then we all work hard and there's that temptation to want to check the email on your days off and when you're going out of town. And I said, look, do not check email. Go enjoy yourself. I may send some emails just because, maybe I'm working on a Saturday and there's an archival question that I might have that can wait until Monday. It can all wait till Monday. If I send you an email, do not respond. It's just a sort of like, hey, when you get back in, we can talk about this, but do not answer. So
Yeah.
it's I try to encourage myself, hey, don't worry about it. Just it can wait. Unless there's a program going on that weekend that we have to talk about, that's fine. But if there's not, you're going out of town, by all means, please do not.
Yeah. And that starts with, you showing that too. It starts with, as a leadership, showing the actions that you want other people to follow. I am horrible at doing that. I check my emails at night. Jennifer can attest. She's gotten emails from me at 7, 8 at night. So it's one thing where I say that and I want people to do it, but I have to show it myself. I have to be the one to say, all right, I'm out of the office. I'm going to not answer this stuff or not send this along, because I need to be away for a little bit. And that was the last thing. My supervisor just went on vacation for the next week, and that's what I told him yesterday. I do not expect to see answers for anything I send.
So Felicia, how do you check email when you're checking at 7 o'clock at night? Is it on your phone, or are you actually keeping your work computer open? Because I find that helps me. I don't even check my work email on my phone. If it's only on my work computer. If my work computer's turned off, I can't check email.
It's definitely my phone.
Yeah,
I will say, I would say of all the traits of a millennial, that's the one I have. I'm real connected on my phone.
Taking work email off my phone was a huge, a huge help, because and Jennifer knows this, I'll be checking stuff at night. And sometimes, doing work at night is because I want to, or it's when I can fit it in. And that's my responsibility. I've taken on that. But when it's on your phone, it did increase that compulsive kind of feeling like, oh, well, I'm right here, I better do it. And there's an urgency and people need answers now. And so I had to, turn that off. And that's been a huge help. I don't know if there's other things that people do.
Yeah. And I'm fine, Christina, with getting an email from you at 8 o'clock at night. If I know you spent the day hiking and that's how you're making up your time, as you're doing it at night, that's totally fine. I'm not going to answer you at 8 o'clock at night. But
and that goes back to knowing your staff and trusting your staff. I have the days that I work at home, I usually take a break in the middle of the day and I go out and I'll walk around the area or something, or go do a few loads of laundry or go do my grocery shopping or something in the middle of the day, and then I work a little later at night. That's just trusting your folks to get their projects done that they need to get done. And that's if you trust them, they're going to trust you too. So that's what it all goes back to. And I know we are getting ready to run out of time.
Yeah, we are. So for those of you on this call who aren't managers, who are dealing with a manager who might expect you to check your email at 8 o'clock at night, have you come up with any good ways to stop that, or is that part of your kind of big issue, is that you feel like you're always having to be on because your manager always wants you to be checking email? Is that a big issue for anyone? I guess not, Felicia. Nobody has that issue. They all have
nice.
Like you and Nathan.
I was about to say that I don't have that issue with my manager per se. I mean, every once in a while maybe, but in general, no. But I do feel like I'm often pulled into other people's urgencies, and that's obviously sometimes both managerial and laterally.
Mhm.
Pulled into other people's urgencies a lot, so it's not necessarily by email, but certainly in other ways.
Yeah. Elsie.
Well, the way I've sort of managed that is during the day there's a lot going on, and I can't always talk to my staff, but we have a small staff, so what I am able to do is sort of adjust to what everybody can do and when everybody can communicate. So I've sort of formulated specific communications with specific people, and that works if your staff is very small. But obviously, that's not something that can be done when your staff is larger. I will sometimes touch base with my marketing manager. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we'll touch base before supper, and that works for us. But you know, once again, you have to keep in mind everybody else, and communicate. So, and when to make yourself available and when to say no.
Yeah. All right. I know we are right at the hour, and we've had a couple folks who've had to log off. So I will say thank you to Felicia for helping lead our
Thank you, guys.
conversation today. It was wonderful. And if you didn't attend the conference, you haven't yet had a chance to watch the presentation, go ahead and do it, because it's a great presentation, and we're happy to be able to share it with you. Thanks to Seema and Michelle for making that available. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.